Welcome to the Empower Hour with Greater Nashua Mental Health. The Empower Hour will provide information and support about mental health, substance use, and behavioral health. Our goal is to share inspiring stories about transforming lives, to strike down stigma, and to encourage our community to reach out and get help when needed. Mental health is part of all of our lives. It's time we talk about it. I'm Dr. Cynthia Whitaker, President and CEO of Greater Nashua Mental Health, and it's time to get empowered. Hello, and welcome to Empower Hour with Greater Nashua Mental Health. I'm Dr. Cynthia Whitaker, and I have the privilege of being the President and CEO at Greater Nashua Mental Health. Today, on this episode, I have with me two guests from the Nashua School District. So I would like to welcome you to the show and have you introduce yourselves for the audience.
Hi, I'm Lori Coutu. I'm the Director of School Counseling at Nashua High School South.
At Nashua High School South. Mm-hmm. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kate Marcotte. I'm the Director of School Counseling at North.
At Nashua High School North.
Yes.
So awesome. So thank you both for being here today. Our thought was we would have some conversation about not only the way Greater Nashua Mental Health partners with this school district, but also just what you all do to support the young people in our community. So maybe just starting with, what exactly does a director of counseling do at the high school? So whoever wants to just tell us what it is your job is.
I will just say I don't think we do much counseling in this role.
Yeah.
We do mostly leadership. Our school counselors really take the lead with students. Neither of us have caseloads, and we do a lot of the administrative parts of this job, working with our principals and looking at data and that sort of thing.
Cool. Would you add anything, Lori?
I would just say it's a different day-to-day, minute-to-minute, and our calendar is secular, so we certainly have different things at different times, and helping our team build and create opportunities for kids, whether it's for college or mental health or scheduling. So it is, and connecting outside agencies, inside agencies, parents. So it is working with a lot of people, even though we don't have caseloads of our own.
So overseeing the other counselors and who do have caseloads to directly support students in all kinds of activities.
Absolutely.
So in your roles, you must be helping coordinate some of the collaboration between Greater Nashua Mental Health, our staff, and your staff. So what does that look like?
Okay, so it usually starts in the summer, and just some of logistical things, making sure we have office space for the counselors and what their schedule, your counselors, what their schedules look like, and they coordinate with everybody in our office, so they know what days they're in and when to call kids, and from having familiar faces around, so some of that. And then even over the summer, we met to talk about programming and how, just the little changes that might happen with you guys in it, with us as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the day-to-day is just working with the counselor in our building and talking about the kids they're servicing, and maybe whatever is coming up in our offices, in the counseling offices, and seeing that ways that mental health in schools can maybe help.
Yeah, so thanks for naming that, Lori. So we call the program at Greater Nashua Mental Health in the Schools. And so we have some of our staff assigned to different schools throughout the district who see kids in your buildings to just make it easier access for them. But of course, we don't take people, right, without parents knowing, right? We treat them just like any other client who would cease to get services in our building. I think that's probably an important thing for people to understand in the way that we interact. Like, you might identify someone who needs services, but for us to actually provide services, the parents are involved, they do an intake with us, and we get the whole consent to treat just like we would with any other kid.
Right. And
That's right.
I think it is the behind the scenes portion of it, but it is nice to eliminate a barrier for so many students by providing the service in our building.
Yeah, so it decreases people's need to drive to our facility, or parents that might have jobs, or a single parent who's working different hours.
And gives them just kids the resource while they're in the building.
Yeah.
You know, it just when they might need it. You know, kids are struggling all throughout the school day, not just when they get home with their parents. So it just gives them the resources having their counselor right then and there with them.
Yeah, right, especially maybe for kids whose symptoms might be related to challenges or interpersonal things that come up at school, right?
Absolutely, and that happens all the time, and it's nice that, you know, we might catch, or one of our counselors might catch somebody from Greater Nashua Mental Health and able to say, hey, before you have your session, or can we just touch base about this person? And so it's nice to be able to collaborate too. And again, with the parent permission, because that all usually takes place right ahead of time, which is great.
It sure does. So what are you either noticing? I don't want to make us all talk about negative things, but like, what are you noticing kids are struggling with, or what have you seen either our support or things that you're doing in the school help kids with these days?
I think we're seeing lots of anxiety and depression. Obviously, I think that we're still seeing kids struggling with symptoms from the pandemic. They had that loss of time in school, and it seems so silly that it was so long ago, but they're still struggling with learning in the classroom and attending to learning, and that affects their mood too. Yeah, so those are the things I think. But we also see kids with suicidal ideation,
self-harm.
Yep, definitely self-harm. We're seeing the gamut, I think, in the school.
Yeah, what I used to say about the pandemic was it sort of escalated symptoms for all of us.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you were somebody that maybe had mild symptoms, now maybe you're having moderate ones. And if you had moderate, now maybe you're having, you know, a little bit more significant.
Right.
I think it's a little different for the youth that kind of lived through that. My daughter was a middle schooler during that time. She's now a senior in high school. And just, I mean, so many of them are just at such critical ages.
Absolutely.
And just the impacts it had on their ability to interact with people, and the anxiety and fear they feel about the world.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
My son graduated through the pandemic and went to college, and he was very different than my older son that didn't have the challenges of the pandemic to deal with. And it's not that the pandemic is the only issue. I mean, we have issues with social media. Obviously. You know, these kids' lives are right in front of their faces on their phones all the time. So, and what their friends are doing or not doing is there too. And that causes issues also.
Yeah, definitely, like almost like cell phone addiction or that sort of thing. And I don't think students name that at all, but then this year their students aren't allowed to use their phones.
The cell phone ban,
so I do think that there's probably been a major adjustment, and we saw a lot of good things come out of it. You know, students talking to each other again, more noise in the cafeteria, but definitely an adjustment, I think.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think for people that don't work with youth, or that didn't have young children during this time, maybe think, oh, well, it's like when I was a kid, but yet it really is just so different, right? I mean, I like to think I'm not that old, right? Yes, and yet, but like, if you had a bad school day, you left it at school and you went home,
right?
I mean, you'd have to have time to have the telephone that had a wire on it, right? To talk to somebody. But now a bad day at school can follow kids home and all weekend, and that they're on their phones and social media.
And all their friends know about it.
And all their friends know about it, right?
Nothing's private anymore. Well, that's how it feels.
Yeah. It's like, which is very vulnerable.
Absolutely.
And especially while you're in those developmental stages where you're already dealing with identity or, being vulnerable about who you are. And then this sort of adds to it.
I think kids get stuck on what to share and what not to share because everything's shared, right? Everything's public. And so when they're sharing something private about themselves, they want to take it back, but now they can't, right? It's out in the open.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that same thing. Just, kids have all sorts of, whether temptations and choices that they have to make and places where they make mistakes and have to pick up the pieces or whatever. So it's just another added component with cell phone and social media, and you make a mistake, and sometimes that's one you just can't take back.
Right. Which a mistake you can't take back can then have a lot of consequences on mood and
absolutely.
self-identity and fear and anxiety or
School avoidance.
school avoidance. Yeah. Yeah. But, I mean, how big of a problem is school avoidance?
I'd say one of our top. I mean, I think attendance can be.
I think for some kids, attendance is really an issue. It's not, 90% of our students.
No.
That's not what it is. It's probably, I don't know, if I was going to give a percentage, 10%. But school avoidance can happen periodically. It might be for a week after an event happens and they don't want to come back to school because they don't want to see the kids involved or the kids know about their issue. And what we tell kids a lot is there's so much that happens in a day here that kids have already forgotten what has happened to you. But they're kids, and so they're so aware of what's happening in their personal life.
Yeah. Well, and the developmental stage is one that's focused on themselves.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, we don't always lose that as adults, but it's appropriate developmentally for kids to be focused on themselves.
Right.
And so if something happens, of course, there's sort of that ripple effect.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's magnified. Yeah.
One of the things that's sort of come up a lot publicly recently because of some legislation around MTSSB specifically, which is like a framework, right, for public health and social emotional learning, is just what do schools do for a framework? Right? How do you find kids that are at risk? Or what do you do for general kids for like education about issues? Like does that fall under what the two of you do in the schools?
Well, we have an MTSSB person through the district, but they do meet with us and talk about the different tiers and where our resources go. And yes, so a little bit.
Yeah, and then I think we have groups within the building, like we have something called chat, so that's once a week to identify students that maybe are struggling in whatever it is, whether it's attendance or academics or behaviors are ticking up, and so there's people that meet as a team and kind of figure out what interventions we could put in. And then there's other people within the building. We try to give as many resources as we can to. We have a social worker and an SAP counselor, and so and you guys. So it's we meet to try to throw as many resources as we possibly can where we can.
Yeah, I think that's what's hard for people not in your system to really understand is just how many different people there are, right? Working collaboratively together.
Absolutely.
And how many different types of kids, issues, families that you're trying to figure out how to support, right? Because what helps one person isn't necessarily what's going to help another person. And that's a lot to figure out in a system as big as our school system here.
Right. It sure is.
Yeah. You're like, yes. We agree. Yes, Cynthia, yes. So what does that look like? What is collaboration look like? Or do you have systems that help you catch kids?
It looks like a lot of, sometimes it's a phone call, like, can you please help me out because you know that resource and you've got to fast track a referral or something like that because the kid really needs something right away. And that's why it's nice to have a good collaboration and know who I can pick up the phone to and call.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's looking at grades and seeing who's not doing well and trying to catch up with those kids and find out what's going on.
Yeah, is there something impacting that for them?
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely. Right. Attendance is another thing we're looking at all the time to see if we can figure out what might be going on with those students and try to support them.
Yeah.
But it's mostly collaboration, I would say.
Oh, absolutely.
Talking to each other about the students on counselors' caseloads and what's going on with them.
And teachers identifying, letting us know what they're seeing in
them.
classrooms. And then, so sometimes it takes a little time from the classroom, to maybe a meeting and then to the resource and a referral and until some things can take place. But like I said, there are those times where you just have to pick up the phone.
Yeah. One of the things you're making me think about is when we teach and train about suicide prevention, right? We often talk about how every person has a different piece of the puzzle, and that what might not look high risk to you or to me, when we put those three pieces together, we can see the risk differently. And like that reminds me of what you're talking about, right? With that collaboration, each of you might have a different piece. The teacher might see something, one of your adjustment counselors might see something, or whatever that is. But to have that meeting where you come together really helps identify who needs different supports and resources. What needs do they have?
Best.
Yeah. Because ultimately, the goal is to help kids learn.
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely.
And so what do people need to know about what gets in the way of learning?
So much.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, I think, that's a great question. I think, sometimes home life gets in the way of learning. Definitely attendance, sleep gets in the way of learning.
Yes.
Hunger.
Having your needs met gets in the way of learning. Just those basic needs met.
Yeah. Just like having a shower on the regular and having somebody that will remind you to do that.
Having something happen that day, maybe a fight with a friend or a breakup with a boyfriend, is going to impact a student. There's all kinds of things. Their mood in general.
Yeah.
You're struggling academically, or worrying about goals in the future. Those things. I mean, we really could go on.
Go on and on. There's so many things.
There's a lot.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times maybe people think, and maybe they think even we as adults should like just deal with it, suck it up, and move on. And yet there's so much research that tells us no, right? That the best thing to do is actually to pause, acknowledge what's going on, talk about it, and then learn what to do with it, right? To then either prevent it the next time or move through it quickly the next time. I just feel like that needs to be said, because I do think there's a lot of people that are like, oh, we're being too easy on kids, but I don't think that's it.
Oh, I don't think that's it either. I don't think we're easy on kids in school. I think there's still expectations, but there's an understanding that there's a lot going on with kids in school, and that we have to meet them where they are.
Right.
Not that they're going to be a person they're not.
Right. Right. And probably actually helps us catch more kids and help them do better than, kids that leave the system and never come back.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And I think I was thinking of mental health in schools. I think having that allows the kids to sort of dig into the issue a little bit. A counselor with, 200 or so students, we, don't have time for that really, half hour, 45 minutes sit down to kind of dig into the things. But identifying them and then being able to have a follow-up conversation or knowing how to have that conversation if you see a behavior in the future, that we can do. But to really dig into it is, you allow for more time, I think, in your sessions, which is nice.
Yeah. And some might even say it's more appropriate.
Of course.
Too, right?
Absolutely.
And not only do you not have the staff to do like that real one-on-one type level of what's going on internally for a kid, but how to keep a little bit of that separation I think for kids is probably healthy too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just think that we're trained to do directive care. We're just, in the moment, get them back into class.
Right.
But when they have a mental health and schools counselor, they're there to really work on the problem and focus on the problem at that moment, which we can really only do in little pockets of time.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, they might have that mental health and schools meeting on Monday, and then their counselor is following up on them on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, but it's in small pockets of time, not, a full hour session where they can really work on the problem.
Right. Right. So have either of you witnessed like a success story or something that comes to mind, whether it's even just the collaboration or a specific individual, youth, or family comes to mind?
I can talk about something recently that happened. We had to call mobile crisis, which is, do I have to explain what that is? So that is a organization we call when a kid's in crisis. So, and Manchester came out, and the way they service a student is not bad, but it's just different than how Greater Nashua Mental Health services a student. So the student had to wait a while to get an appointment, and our mental health and schools counselor ended up being in the building, and I just said, how can we get her in quick? This kid really is not actively suicidal, but very depressed and needs to see someone. And we worked together, and we found a way to get her networked right away. So I think we just need to get that student help and not waiting a week.
Yeah, I mean, because crisis services are meant to be sort of short term or for true emergent situations. But might not be exactly what somebody needs.
Exactly. I mean, they were doing the best they could. I mean, I know that. And I think the parent was trying to figure it out too. But I think, we are maybe the support to the parents to understand the mental health system too. I don't always think they know who do I connect with first? Do I call my child's pediatrician? Can I just call a therapist?
Do I need a referral?
Yeah, how do I handle this? Right. My child's struggling. I don't know what it is. A lot of parents don't know how to identify this is anxiety or this is depression. Or, what's going on with their child. Is it circumstantial? Is it medical? I don't think they always know. So I think the schools are the resources to help them identify, well, not even identify, to get them the services that they need.
Right.
And I think that's where mental health in schools comes in. It's just such a luxury to have this service, in our hands. It really is.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
What would you add, Kate?
I was just thinking a couple of things. Like I know when kids come up from the middle school and they have like a previous relationship with one of the counselors, it's nice when hey, you're going to see me here too. Or, kids will pop in and say, is so-and-so going to be here? And they're, when they're seeking out their counselor, that that's because the good work is happening and that they're feeling good about it and they want to continue the work, whatever it might be. So I think, and you see those little successes because I work in the main office, so you can see, when the kids are seeking out or they're happy leaving a session or looking forward to a session. I think it's just nice.
Yeah. So nice to have a safe space. Like we all really need a safe space, right?
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, some of us have it with partners or family or friends, but youth might not have that.
Right.
And so for them to find that place, so important. So important.
I think what mental health in schools does for a lot of our kids is help identify what the problem is. I think sometimes they don't know. They know they don't feel good, but they don't know really what it is.
Yeah.
And I think their counselor helps identify what the issue might be.
Yeah.
Over
I've
time.
certainly seen that where like on the outside it's anxiety or it's depression, but about what?
Yeah.
Right? And is it specific and something that can be quickly addressed, or is it more general, like a generalized anxiety or feeling that might be more biological and take more time to figure out how to address. But you don't know unless you really take that time.
Right.
Which you don't have the luxury of in the school
We're
system.
not clinicians, so
Right.
you know.
Right. Yeah. Fascinating. There's so much like in my brain. There's just so much running around about what we really don't know, right? Or what people don't know. Like you say, a lot of parents don't understand our system, but I think there are plenty of people who don't understand the school system.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I'm not saying they don't understand mental health. I think they do understand mental health. I just don't know if they know how to access
it. Right.
Right.
Or
where the access point is.
Right. What is the difference between a social worker and a guidance
100%.
counselor or a counselor? Right.
Yes.
We all use the same term sometimes, but it's very different.
Sure.
Or the scope within a school versus the scope within 100%. A mental health center, vastly different, which can cause misunderstanding, miscommunication, right? Those kinds of things. So it's good when we can learn more about each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Has there been anything surprising that you've learned about the mental health system that now you're like, oh, I'm so glad I know this because I can communicate that differently to youth or families?
I'm trying to think of an instance. I don't know if I have had anything surprising.
I don't think surprising, no.
Maybe just interesting, like how our mental health counselor identifies an issue differently than maybe we would, just from the clinical background. It's not really surprising. Just that's how you talk about that. Just understanding.
More interesting. Yeah. That having that different perspective.
Yes, absolutely.
Or sometimes just when students and families hear something from the outside counselor that just reaffirms something that maybe we were working towards, and then it's like, okay, now we're on the same page, and
right,
you're seeing something from a different light, which I think is nice. It gives a whole nother perspective.
Yeah, it just flooded with like my own kid. Well, you're my mom, you have to say that. You're my teacher, you have to say that, right? And then when a different person says it, they're like, okay, maybe I actually need to listen to this, right?
Yeah.
So I can definitely resonate with what you're saying. Sometimes that perspective just affirms what you might have already said or what a teacher might have said.
And also for the student, maybe they feel safer saying something to the counselor, and they're, bridging the gap back to us, like, okay, thank you for bringing that to our attention. So that's always great when that happens too.
Yeah. So my brain just went in a totally different direction. So apologies for that. And just be ready to take the ride with me for a little bit. Was what just sort of came up to my mind was in our community, we have a whole other layer of not only access to mental health access, but language access. We have a lot of families in our community who use languages other than English. Absolutely. And I know what that looks like on our side with some bilingual staff interpreters, contracts with interpreters. I'm just curious how that shows up in the school, what that added layer does for you and the staff you oversee.
We have a family engagement coordinator that really helps us bridge the gap between school and families, but we definitely have to use translators all the time, especially with parents. Maybe with students, we can get by with our family engagement coordinator or maybe a teacher, but definitely with parents, we do use some apps like Talking Points to communicate too. But it is a challenge, definitely a challenge.
I think there seems to be more resources here and there. So, I think our staff is really good at it. Even if there is a need of interpreters, that we're gonna try, we're gonna ask and really advocate and see what we can do and how we can help students and their families access any whatever resources. But I think it can be another barrier.
Yeah, it's a barrier to access, I think. And I think, like you were mentioning, like a lot of what you do sometimes is give the resources to people. But if those resources are all in English, or a family might be, how do they actually understand that? It's just, we want to make sure we're reaching everybody we can,
Right.
to make sure all of the youth are supported, regardless of what their situation, language, whatever it might be is.
100%. I think it's hard.
Yeah.
I think the understanding of mental health in other countries is different.
Yeah.
Or the acknowledgement of mental health issues is different. And but I also think just getting parents to understand their children too is also, it's not a barrier or anything. It's just what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Are there other barriers that come to mind? Is resources certainly probably.
I think resources is the biggest barrier, I would
Yeah.
say, just having the availability of therapists, right away to help students. I think sometimes, and I feel bad for parents, I'm a parent myself, I understand how difficult parenting is. I think sometimes parents don't understand the significance of what their child is going through because they know their child so well and they just don't understand. They know something's wrong, they just don't understand what's wrong. And I think that can sometimes be a barrier for support. So I think it's just difficult. I think parents have a difficult job, so.
Yeah.
I was at a conversation last week, actually, where we were talking about just mental health stigma and how sometimes families that might look more put together, either the family themselves might say, oh, this can't be that, or even professionals might say, this can't be that. So it's interesting because, of course, we know mental health challenges can impact anyone.
Right, 100%.
But yet there is sort of, I don't know, right? Like this challenge sometimes of recognizing it and talking about it. I think that still impacts everybody and just impacts different families differently.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And I bet that shows up at the school.
It definitely does. Yeah.
Well, you might have one kid that comes in and says, I'm feeling anxious, or this is, and they can name it right away, where another kid has just had a behavior that maybe stems from being anxious, but is not identifying it that way. So, and everything in between, for sure.
Yeah, and that brings me all the way back to like that work kind of in the school system with younger kids about just the importance of that basic social emotional health type learning so that kids can have a name for it.
Right.
That sometimes, again, people overlook about just how important that is to have language behind how we feel.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then of course, the high schoolers, they're just not going to talk about it except on TikTok or wherever they're talking about it.
Exactly. Or I don't feel that way.
Right. Yeah. Or they'll over talk about it and over identify. Right.
Yes.
And so I think a lot of that collaboration, putting those puzzle pieces together, is about, okay, what's actually happening for this individual at any given time. Is there anything we haven't chatted about that you think would be good for people to know about what happens in our school system related to mental health for kids or the collaboration with mental health in the schools? What haven't we chatted about that would be a good something for people to know?
I don't know. I think we hit most of the points.
Nothing comes to mind?
Nothing comes to mind.
Nothing comes to mind?
Nothing.
I would say for you that you need resources and support.
I thought we covered that. Yeah.
I'm just going to say it again.
Yes, we do. We need resources.
Like
Absolutely.
when I hear you say like staff that you supervise are responsible for 200 plus kids,
Yes.
right? that's hard.
We're not hitting every student. We're not seeing every student. I mean, that's what 200 students means.
Right.
You just can't see it. You can't possibly see every student. So you're seeing the kids that come to your office the most, that take up the most time. And when you have a lower caseload, you might get out to check in, just check in with kids. That would be nice to be able to do.
Right, be proactive instead of reactive all of the time. But
Yeah.
it's definitely busy.
Yeah, and we in community mental health understand that because a lot of our staff have high caseloads than maybe other places might have, and yet I think we all do what we do because we care about the health, the success of people.
Yeah,
Right. That's so true. I think even more than mental health, just having community resources is a challenge. In New Hampshire, we don't have a homeless shelter for teens. We just don't have some of the resources we could really use.
Right, other resources to make sure kids are fed, showering, those kinds of things. I think a lot of those things that you mentioned are the barriers to learning. We're not always supporting fully because we don't have those resources in our communities. And yet we're collaborating and doing the best we can do, right?
Sure we are.
That's right.
But we could use more. I'm really hopeful this next generation of kids, the ones that are in your schools right now that are learning those words and are talking about it, are gonna want to be in this field, are gonna want to support others.
I hope
I
so.
see it
I
in
think
them
I
helping
do
each
too.
other.
Yeah, I think so too. I think kids are so much more aware of mental health issues, and it's not as a stigma for this generation as it is maybe for ours. So I think that's a good thing, and hopefully they'll want to be in this field.
Know the signs and support one another.
Exactly.
I've seen students that have had struggles, and then when they start to come out and they go, I would love to be, a counselor, and they can identify different types of counselors that that they would maybe want a career path in someday, which is nice.
Right.
Yeah, they recognize that the help they got was helpful.
I mean, what a great way to end our conversation, with hope for the next generation, right? With hope there will be resources, and maybe they don't look like us and professionals. Maybe it's raising up youth to be support for one another.
Sure.
Right? I mean, there's definitely a youth peer support movement. And it's also tricky to figure out, like, who oversees it and what does that look like, and what are the risks and the benefits, and but I have faith they're going to figure that out soon. So, well, thank you both for being here. Thank you for helping us empower our community with a little bit more information about the way we partner, just what mental health in schools looks like, what you can do, and how you're supporting kids. And thank you for what you do.
Thanks for having us.
All right. You're very welcome. And thank you for watching this episode of the Empower Hour with Greater Nashua Mental Health. We wish you an empowered day.